As youth pastors, we often find ourselves in a season of frustration when motivation is just hard to come by. How can we navigate this season and come out victorious? That's what we're talking about today on the Ministry Coach Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the Ministry Coach Podcast, where we bring you weekly tips and tactics to help you fast track the growth and health of your youth ministry. This podcast is the coach for the coachless when it comes to youth ministry. My name is Jeff Lascola. This is
Kristen Lascola.
Kristen, let me ask you a question. Channeling your dad here from Tennessee.
That's what my dad sounds like, in case you were wondering what he was doing.
Where do you go when you're frustrated? How do you get out of that spot?
Wow. This is already.
I don't know why. I just felt like it was a Bill night.
Well, you're in a kooky mood.
It's late. I got up early. It's been a long day.
Okay. Well, then we'll just cut to the chase. I think you're ready. You want to just go to bed? I'll finish up. I can do it.
Up here, I'm already asleep.
Great. All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm on my own tonight, so you can just tune out the clown to my right.
I think you're the one who's asleep.
Anyways, so all right, well, this is a perfect night to talk about this topic because we're talking about what do you do when you are just frustrated? Where do we get our motivation to keep going? This could be a weekly challenge for you. This could be a seasonal challenge for you, or maybe a daily challenge. I think there's different seasons in ministry of how heavy we feel that tension and that frustration and the lack of motivation. And so we're going to talk through just some ways to navigate that, like that battle for your mind and for your heart. But before we start, I just wanted to put it out there. And obviously I'm biased because I am a youth pastor, but I think like this is like the most important job in the world. So, I mean, any ministry, right? Like what is your job? To make people fall in love with Jesus and his church. Like what else is there? You know what I mean? And sometimes like when I get just stuck in the grind of like doing a job and forgetting the calling behind it, I can kind of default into that frustration because no matter where you work, a job is a job and jobs are frustrating and our calling and our job overlap. Like, yes, we have this big, great commission calling to make people fall in love with Jesus and introduce them to his love and a relationship with him and help them understand scripture and, you know, build relationships that lead people to the Lord. Like that is such a cool job. Like, and most of us listening get paid to do that. Like what a world, you know, it's like, sometimes I have to like, whoa, I need to like check that for a second, like just let that thought marinate. But then I go to work on Monday, right? So, and then I'm in meetings and then I have to turn in expense reports and then I have to, answer emails and clean up the youth room, all the hot chocolate left all over the place. And so there are just parts of a job that are a job. Now, when we talk about frustration, I think that comes probably from two main sources, either people or a person in particular, or an organizational broken spot or tension point of maybe methodology of how things are run. And as you're listening to this episode, whatever that frustration you're feeling is, I want you to filter it through, is my calling bigger than that person and that thing? Because let me say, your calling isn't to one church only. So some people I think feel this like, well, I got to stick it out. And if you're in a like super unhealthy situation at a particular church, it doesn't mean if you leave that church, your calling is over. Right. You know what I mean? But sometimes we can pull the trigger too fast and we don't ride the highs and lows of just any relationship because, you know, we're part of the body. We're part of a family. Families quarrel, families fight, families have tension, families have conflict that they need to push through. And so I think sometimes we can prematurely say, this is unhealthy, I'm out of here,
Right.
and jump out too soon when it's like, well, maybe this is just a tough situation and your calling for this particular church is this is still where God wants you. You just need to navigate it. So,
and I know I'm not supposed to talk because I'm already checked out.
Quiet, Bill.
No. So I heard one time a pastor say, and this is kind of more going for church goers looking for a church hopping and stuff like that. But I think it would
Church chopping
and shopping. It would also, I think, go for church employees. If you're at a church and you're not satisfied, that you just want to bail. He was basically saying, if you see something that's missing, instead of saying, well, I'm out of here, can you fill that? Or can you
Yeah, I've heard that somebody
situation?
say that too. Like instead of, and I've heard it for like a church goer, like people saying, well, it's cliquey. And it's like,
Right.
okay, well,
When you're
what have
church
you
chopping.
done too? When you're church chopping, make sure you first see like, yeah, where am I part of the solution here?
Right.
I think it's very easy to bring problems to the table, but that's not what leaders do.
Right.
Leaders bring solutions.
Preach.
Right. And so anyone can point out and guess what? The church down the street has problems too.
Totally.
And the church in the next state has problems too. And the church that you idealize and have heard this, that, and
Because the church is made up of people.
Right. And so we have to get real about like, there is no perfect situation. And each one of us has to figure out, depending on where we're at, is this a frustration that I'm going to like see through?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is worth it. And maturity and like humility says I can do this. Or is God literally calling us out into a new environment? So anyways, number one, come to grips with the truth about leadership and ministry. Okay. So my leadership mantra that I always tell my interns when they're having a bad day, or when we have to have a really tough conversation, or when we have to do something unpleasant, I say, what does Kristen always say about leadership? And they look at me and say, leadership isn't fun. And I say, right. And you need to understand that, because leadership isn't fun. Leadership, quite frankly, sucks a lot of the time. And the reason for that, like my good friend Chris Brown, our senior pastor, always says, he says, you're going to live with low levels of frustration as a leader. And he's like, oh, not your frustrations toward you. Like people will be frustrated with you as a leader, and leadership isn't fun. You're the one who has to have tough conversations with people. You're the one that has to put in the extra hours or the hard work or question your gifting all the time and bear the weight of, comparison. And, leadership is lonely and it's hard. And so I think sometimes we idealize the role of being in charge is the best position. And it's like, no, it's not, especially when you look at it from a gospel perspective, because what did Jesus say? He said, leaders and teachers are judged more harshly. Mm-hmm. He said, not many of you should be teachers, my brother, and in doing so, you will incur a stricter judgment. And that's like the worst verse in the Bible, because it's like, we're not held to a higher standard. We're held to the same standard more strictly. And so there's just this weight of responsibility that goes along with leadership that we really can't pass the buck. Like Michael Scott, how he was always trying to get Dwight to do his dirty work, there's layoffs, but it's Dwight's fault. Or like when they were like cutting health insurance, You
look over this.
And we don't want to take on those like heavy responsibilities. And that's why leadership, it's not fun. Now, are there fun parts of our job? Of course. Like I go to work and I have a great time, especially on Tuesday nights when it's my program night and I get to see everyone and it's so energetic and hype and fun and like high fives all around. It's so fun. But then I still have to go to work on Wednesday morning and like just do work. So have a realistic view of what leadership is. Like it's not the cush position. And if you feel real cush in your job, like maybe challenge yourself a little bit. And then the second part of that is that ministry isn't easy. So leadership isn't fun and ministry isn't easy. And all you have to do is look at the like top leaders in the Bible and ask yourself if their story sounded easy or not. I think of poor Moses. I'm just like, dang, he led a bunch of like complainers, and I can definitely see myself in Moses and like his anger issues, just like when you're like, okay, enough, and like hit the rock. I probably would have not made it into the promised land either. And that's a great example of being held to the same standard more strictly. He didn't get to go in. But then you also look at the life of Paul, Abraham, and David. And so really, ministry is counting the cost too, is another thing my dear friend Chris Brown always says is he says, if you can do anything else in life, if you think you might want to be a cop, go do that. If you think you might want to be a teacher or an EMT or whatever it is, go do that. If this is the only thing that you can do, well, welcome to the team. He said, but really pursue something else if you think you might be interested, because he says this is too hard and too big a burden to just dabble in.
Right.
This is like a calling that you're really like all in, but understanding the ones who have gone before us didn't have it easy either. So, there's not some weird thing happening to us. Like, why is my ministry so hard? Why is all ministry so hard? Well, we have an adversary that is working really hard against us.
Totally.
Because what did I say in the beginning? We have the most important job in the world. We're out to like make Jesus known. So of course our adversary is going to push hardest against that. And so our job will feel uphill. It will feel like we're trying to run underwater a lot of times. And yes, we'll enjoy some great seasons. And we'll get into that in a second. But I think that's why I put it as number one, is having a realistic view of what this is. This isn't just any old 9-to-5 job. Because if it were, we probably would have left a long time ago. It's like, I'm not putting up with this. Like, you're kidding me. But we have a deeper conviction of like, I have the most important job in the world. And so any pastor, but specifically student ministries, because they say most people, if they're going to accept Jesus into their lives, will do so between the ages of 11 and 13.
No pressure.
No pressure. It's the Holy Spirit's work, so let him handle it. All right. Okay. Number 2, this is one of my favorite phrases. I just feel like Chris Brown should be on this episode because now I'm quoting him for the 3rd time. For number 2, develop a thick skin and a tender heart. So, when I said a lot of people are going to have frustration toward you, that could eat some of us alive.
Oh, totally.
Especially those people pleasers or people and pastors really care what people think about them a whole lot. We're highly insecure people. We want everyone to like us and think we're great. Most pastors are Enneagram 3s, so I've heard, and that's like a pretty driven, but could be an insecure person. So developing that thick skin of like, the punches are gonna come. People are not gonna like what you do. People are gonna question things that you do. People are maybe gonna talk about you or your ministry behind your back, whatever it might be. So you will have to develop, if you're a highly sensitive person, you might have to develop that thick skin to be able to stay in the game and stay focused. But don't forget the second part, a tender heart. Because sometimes I think we can have such a thick skin that we're just impenetrable. I don't care what anybody thinks about me. Like I do.
That's the defense, is that you go there because you think, well, if I allow myself to have that tender heart, I'm going to get crushed. It's going to get stomped on. But if I put up those walls, if I thicken that skin, then I don't care what anybody says. And it's a hard balance to have both. You can kind of go one way or the other,
right?
But not in between.
And I think Paul's a really good example of that. Like he had major pushback. Like, oh my gosh, like how he was able to keep going and preaching and saying, and all these mission trips where he encountered so much opposition, like, I mean, you could mistake that for like closed doors, right? And he kept going, but then you see his tender heart and how he greets these churches and just has such immense love for them and keeps going despite the opposition, just to know, I don't care what you think about me. You guys need Jesus. I'm going to keep preaching, keep going. And I think he's a great example of that, as are a lot of, people in the Bible. But yeah, I think that's a trick of longevity, to learn that. And that kind of helps you get through some of those frustration moments of sometimes you just got to buck up and be a leader and take a punch and it'll happen. But, keep that tender heart. Number 3, this one I think has been the biggest one for me over the years. And I've mentioned this on previous podcasts. It just seems to come up in conversation a lot. And that is, remember who you work for. This has been huge for me. And the reason is not because I have awful bosses. I really don't. I've worked for some incredible people and I'm very blessed by that. But there's days when I need to remember who my actual boss is. And I think this translates for a lot of youth pastors, because I think youth pastors, a lot of times their number one complaint is their senior pastor and their direct report. And they feel like they have a really short leash, or they feel micromanaged, or they feel like they can never be good enough. And they're always like, well, I need your numbers to be bigger. And I think you should teach on this. And your sermon wasn't good. And, like there's a lot of really tricky dynamics between youth pastors and their senior pastors. We should do another episode on that. I did one for YMB a long time ago, but I think that's worth talking about again. But I think, for our purpose today, just remembering, like, who do you ultimately work for? Like, if you can only see your senior pastor, like, your motivation might wane after a while, because, well, I can never please this guy.
Right.
Or they never think I'm good enough, or all they care about is numbers. And so when you see it as like, hey, God has put them in charge over me, but that's not ultimately who I answer to, and keeping focused on, I answer to one person. He has put me here. And that was a really big, I had to really grasp that, especially being like a female in youth ministry, because I feel like in the beginning I had some opposition there, and I had to just say, he's put me here. I'm going to be faithful to him. And until he takes me out, I'm going to keep doing what he's asked me to do. I don't answer to them. I don't answer to them. I don't answer to them. Like, throw a punch, but I don't answer to you. And I'm not doing anything on your authority. I'm doing it on God's authority. And my favorite book to kind of back that up, I've mentioned it a million times because it's had such a huge impact on me, 200 Pomegranates in an Audience of One
by
Sean
Wood.
Yep.
Yeah.
So read it. It'll change the way you do ministry. And also, David says, like, who am I to give a sacrifice that costs me nothing? Our ministry is our act of worship. Our ministry is our sacrifice to God, and it will cost us something. And that's the way sacrifice is. That's the way worship is. It costs us something. We feel it, And so to think like, oh, this should be a cush job, if it's our act of worship to God, we will feel the pain of that sometimes. Okay, number 4, realize ministry has seasons, okay? There's some really good seasons, and then there's some really bad seasons. And when you're around long enough, I think you realize when you have those really frustrating seasons, you remember coming out of it, and you remember that it's not permanent, and you remember that there will be a good season ahead. And if you're in a really good season, know
brace yourself
that it won't always be this way. You'll get a new class. You'll get a new set of parents. You'll get a new staff member. You'll have a new attack from the enemy. Like, whatever it might be, you have to learn to in a content way, ride those waves of desert oasis, because what did Paul say? He says, I can thrive in all circumstances. It's like just knowing let's ride it out.
Mm-hmm.
Enjoy the good times, ride out the bad times, because it'll flex and flow. So if you're in a deep season of frustration right now and you're lacking motivation, it's temporary. It's not going to be that way forever. And number 5 might help you with this is one of my tips is if you find yourself in that season, start something new. I think sometimes it can be the rut of like, this is just the same thing every day and I'm just frustrated and tired and bored. But if you want something to put wind in your sails, and I'm not saying add more work to your plate because maybe you're running on burnout and that's what got you here in the first place. But what would really put wind in your sails? Because a lot of us have the freedom of designing our ministries around our gifts, strengths, and passions. Unless you have a super high micromanager over you and a super, super short leash. But a lot of us are able to implement programs and start new missions trips and find a series that we're passionate about or create a new event that is going to breathe life into our ministry. Maybe you just need to breathe new life into your ministry by doing something new. It could be a season for that. Sometimes we are like, oh, let's not reinvent the wheel. We have our system, it works. But at the same time, there could be like steal an idea from another youth group and make it your own. Put your own spin on it. Get kids excited, like be a galvanizer, get them ready and excited for something new. We started like Double Dog Dare-a-thon a few years ago. I had heard about it on Stuff You Can Use and it was so fun. And now it's like a tradition. But those first couple of years of like this new thing and we got to theme it out and decorate and create it from the ground up, it got us re-excited. So maybe you need to get yourself re-excited by adding something fun and new that will get you excited. Not something that just feels like work to you.
Right.
That aligns with your passions, right? Okay, so number 6, lean into relationship. So when you're feeling frustrated, when you're not feeling motivated, lean into those relationships that fill you up. So can I just be honest with you guys? COVID like killed me. We were jamming 2019, all firing on all cylinders. It was just one of those like oasis seasons of ministry, and I loved it. I was like in my element. COVID hit. We did everything to keep the ship afloat. I think we did a good job with what we were allowed to do. We're in California with some pretty strict restrictions, and our church followed them to a T. So it made for some, we had to be really creative. Now we're back. Where did they all go? Like we were gone for so long. We were online, we were going to kids' houses, we were still doing small groups and all of that, but the momentum we had, it wasn't just like snap your fingers and was back just because we opened the doors. Right. We're getting there now. Last week, I think, was the first week that I'm like, this feels like old times. Yeah. This is awesome, but it killed me. But you know what I learned in those seasons is how much I love my students. Because I was now not focused on the program running smoothly and everything going off without a hitch. I just wanted to look at a student and give them a hug, like, and that's what got me through that frustrating season is leaning into those relationships, like just sitting with my students, like, can we hang out? Can we play Gaga ball? Tell me everything about your life. I just want to hang out with you. Whereas I think pre-COVID, I'd just be like, hey, glad you're here. Right. And I'd keep walking, I would talk to them. But that deep appreciation for people and souls and students and how every one of them is so precious. I'm like, oh, I just love you. And I'll even think about like during worship, I look at each one of them and I thank God for them by name. Like, God, thank you for Nathan. Thank you for James. Thank you for Carissa. Thank you. And I thank God for every single one of them. And I've never been so thankful for the individuals, I used to look at them as a group of like, thank you for my students. I love my job, but now I see them as like, oh, where's Matthew? I haven't seen him in forever. I got to call his parents. I need to see Matthew. Like it's kind of like that 99 sheep thing, and the one is lost and you're like, no, all of you are so precious. I just had a new appreciation for that. So lean into relationships, start seeing, and because maybe your frustration was same as mine, like, where'd you all go? And I know a lot of youth pastors have frustrations with numbers, and that's a sore subject for us. It's okay. It's a safe place. We can talk about it. And we sometimes give pastor math of like how many kids are actually coming to our youth group and stuff because we're insecure. We've already talked about that. So start appreciating the individual and seeing each one and thanking God for each student that comes through, and just have that new appreciation, those fresh eyes of like, I get to share the gospel with this kid. I get to love this kid. Like, every single one of them is so valuable. And then number 7, this is our last number 1, is take Sabbaths. So our church forces us in a good way to take yearly Sabbaths where instead of a work day, we go and do something we love that refills and recharges us. And it's a day that's supposed to be spent with the Lord and like yourself, like doing something alone that you really enjoy. So, you know, people do all kinds of different things. I have this particular beach that I love. It's so quiet and peaceful. I go there, I read, I journal, I pray, I worship, I sleep, and then I go eat something really delicious because what's my hobby? Food and eating. That's really the only hobby I have right now at this stage in my life. So I go and get like a poke bowl or something, or really good coffee, and I just enjoy the Lord and I enjoy what he's given us, and just take a day instead of working to just be quiet and do that. And it's amazing just that renewed, fresh inspiration that you get when you just say, time out. Instead of going to work, the best work I could do right now is be alone with God and to recalibrate myself and figure out, like, why am I such a mess?
Yeah.
Why am I so frustrated?
Yeah, why are you such a mess?
I don't know, Jeff. Why am I such a mess? Go.
I think for all the things you just listed.
Shut up. Nobody asked you. Okay. So, kind of to wrap it up, remember that there is a difference between being frustrated with your calling and being frustrated with an organization. One of those things can be resolved.
Yeah.
And the other one, maybe not. So if you just are feeling like, I don't know that I'm cut out for this, we all have seasons like that, even if you are cut out for it. So be careful, but that might be something you want to spend some time praying over. Maybe that's a Sabbath thing that you take, and it's just like, hey, I'm feeling like there's a difference between my job is hard and I don't want to do this job, you know, because deep down, I want to do this job. I want to do it forever. I can't really think of another job I want to do right now. Who knows? God could change my heart, but I can have days of frustration with like, gosh, dang it. Like, this is not what I signed up for. So those are some questions to ask. But if you're just frustrated with the organization, remember that can be resolved. It doesn't mean you're not a fit youth pastor. You might be in the wrong culture. Every church has a different culture. You might just be in the wrong one. There's a lot of churches I know I wouldn't fit in at.
Totally.
No matter how much experience I have or how good I am at my job, I won't fit in. So
I'd say, Kristen, we don't really like you belching into the microphone all the time.
It's funny. It's relatable. Okay. I can belch words. I can belch your name. I can do all kinds of tricks.
I would say just have a cup of coffee and you'll probably feel a lot better.
Well, remember when the angel, I forget, was it Elijah? They like gave them food, like a cake and something to drink. And they're like, take a nap and eat some food. And then they felt better.
Should be my life verse.
Have some cake, have a nap, and you'll feel much better. Why is that not a worship song?
The kids would love it.
Have a nap. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was bread. I want to remember it as angel food cake because it came from an angel.
Not angel food cake, just cake. All right. Wrapping things up, we've got a couple things for you. Number 1 is question of the day. And then number 2, we're going to announce our 4th winner for our giveaway, which means you've got 3 more weeks of giveaways and then one grand prize winner at the end. If you guys don't know what we're talking about, go back and watch or listen to episode 50, which was Upfront Games, and it'll give you all the details. But we're running a giveaway right now, once a week for 7 weeks, and then there's a grand prize winner at the very end. So this is week number 4. All right, but we're going to do question of the day, which is, if you were to be at karaoke night, what is your go-to song?
Do you want me to tell you or sing it?
Probably just tell me.
Rude. It is I Want to Dance with Somebody by Whitney Houston.
Can you hit all the highs?
I don't know. You told me not to sing, so I guess we'll never find out. I guess I could just say yes. Probably.
I think you could probably.
I really love that song.
You waffle between I'm joking and I'm serious, and I think you might be a better singer than you let on, or you might be much worse than you let on.
I don't know. Do you want the listeners to vote?
Do you want the listeners to vote? Is a better question.
Well, maybe they can comment below, and if enough of them say yes.
Well, you guys need to comment below to say what your karaoke
what's
song would
yours?
be. Oh, mine would be True Faith by New Order, the 80s song. I love that song.
That's a good song.
And I feel like it's within my range. They must have been bad singers too.
You are a singer.
I'm not a good singer, though.
You
Everybody thinks they can sing. I know I can't sing.
I never said I thought I could sing.
Okay, well then you and I know we can't sing. Now, for the weekly winner for the giveaway contest is Mr. Matthew Bradley.
Matthew Bradley.
Hey, I gotta say this. The last 2 winners we've had, they have taken me up on the challenge of writing a review. And that boosted their entries. So if you guys want more entries, leave a review on our podcast, and you'll get 25 extra entries. And that has worked for 2 people, 2 weeks in a row. Good job, Matthew. Hey, for the rest of you guys, make sure you enter our giveaway, and we will see you next time.
Oh, shoot.
Next time.